Hi friends, and welcome to my weekly stream about the Uno platform. My name is Jérôme Laban. I am the CTO of the open source project Uno platform, and I spend about an hour or so every week to take a look at what's new with Uno platform and taking a look at issues and fixing them, so that that gives us an idea of how to build features for Uno platform or to fix issues, whether you find some when you're using Uno platform. So last week was about the Uno platform 4.5 release, and we've got quite a few things in there. So I'll be going through some of those topics, and if I have answers for those, let me know. If you have questions for me about those features, let me know. And I see there's Jose. Jose, it's who's on the stream. Welcome, Jose. So let's dive into it. So the Uno platform 4.5 was actually a quite big release, new 230 features and bug fixes that we added to that. It was a long one because lots of things happened, mostly the release of Visual Studio 2.3, 17.3, sorry, that was in between, and it caused us a few things to look at, primarily on the CI side. So for building Uno to provide you that, and that version, and we had to fix a lot of things. It took a bit more time than we anticipated, but in the meantime, we were able to build a few additional and few interesting things, like the Uno Islands. And Uno Islands is the ability for an app, or a WPF app, to embed a portion of the app or multiple portions of the app being developed with Uno, and in an effort to modernize the application. So it can be it's actually quite similar to the XAML Islands that Microsoft is providing as part of WinUI. It's just we have an Uno implementation for WinUI using Uno that is using Skia, and we're using this to allow the application to get there. So I'm going to show you what it looks like, do it very quickly, and we have a sample that's available in our documentation, as well as the showcase in our Uno samples repo. You can see it here. So Uno samples UI Uno Island sample app, and that is a very simple sample app that will show how using Uno Islands is done. So basically, you have your WPF app, and inside of your WPF app, what you're going to get is, in your main window, you're going to get a XAML host, which is a Uno XAML host, which contains a main page. So the WPF app contains WPF XAML, and you can see here that it's using this CLR namespace markup syntax and the namespace definitions. And then you can go to the share project, which is closer to which contains the files that are part of the WinUI part of the application. So in that case, it will be the Uno side of things, and this is WinUI XAML. So that's interesting because in the same app you can have both as WinUI XAML and WPF XAML, and that's the interesting part. And I'm not going to get into those details there, but there's a way to flag files in the runtime so that both WinUI and Uno recognize which is which, and so that there's a way to make sure that each runtime knows which Uno is used, which XAML is supposed to be used. Was reading at the same time. So I tried to install Uno. So Jose is asking a question. I tried to install Uno on ARM64 on Windows and ARM. Maui is not supported there. Uno cannot be used for development too. I think there's a dependency between Maui and Uno, isn't it? Well, it depends on the target. We know for a fact that developing for WebAssembly is possible. So you can make that work there. Now for the other targets, I think you can also do some Skia development or WPF development. I'm not too sure. So WPF, maybe GTK is not supported on ARM, so it may not work. I'm not too sure. We haven't tested that much on that target, to be honest. So I can't say precisely what works and what's not working. So as I mentioned last time, if you have issues, let us know. Open issues and say, I'm using Uno in that specific condition. I'm developing for iOS, Android, or whatever. And then open an issue and let us know what's working, what's not working, and what kind of errors you're getting, so that we can go and find out what needs to be fixed. So when I launched the application, so you can see here that I have in my main page, the main page it's the WPF main page, and I have an hello with a binding here. And the interesting thing here, I think the sample was built that way. Yes, we have a data context here that says that the main window in WPF has a data context, and the data context is supposed to flow through to the XAML host. So let's say when I run the application, you can see here that the hello here that is defined in that page, that is bound to a binding, uses the friends that has been defined on the WPF side here with the data context. So that's the nice part. It's one of the features that we're looking at to make all the support for islands go deeper. So you can get your application enhanced by using WinUI controls inside of the WPF section, the WinUI section here, while being in an actual WPF application. And this is a WPF button, and this part is a WinUI Uno control. So we're looking at having focus done right. So in this case, you can see that it selects the control here, which doesn't make sense. It's supposed to be going inside. But that's the kind of things that we're going to be looking at to make sure that focus is done properly, that tabbing and things like that, pointers work properly, pop-ups and others. So we're not there yet, but it's something that we're definitely looking at to improve. So if you're interested in that feature, give it a spin and let us know how you can use it. And if there are things that don't work for you and that we can improve. So that's it for Uno Islands. I see that Mike has a question. I've been having issues with Uno WinUI WPF not building in 4.9. Yeah, okay. So 6.09 has been released, and it actually breaks the latest builds of Uno for WPF. And we're actually fixing this by removing the workaround here. What you can do is either remove this target and that's a target that exists in the Uno, or change one of the other targets. So it's something that will be fixed likely tomorrow. We're going to push an update. I think the build is probably done for this one, or close to be done, but we're going to be fixing that very soon. That's the problem with we're trying to work around something from dependencies that don't come from, and the release is not aligned. But anyways, that's what happens. So just so you know, one of the things that you can do is revert. One thing that you can do is revert to 6. It's actually not .NET 609 that's a problem. It's .next. So it's the .NET SDK 60401. And if you downgrade to 400, you're gonna work around the issue, because the fix will not be there and Uno is gonna work as well. So that's something that you can do. On the other features, we had a few new user controls like the breadcrumb. We got a pips pager. We've made a few things around sliders to make it look nicer. So take a look at those. Those are interesting. We had the pull to refresh feature. So that one is interesting. Martin Zickman worked on it. It actually is quite interesting. You can do, let's see, that's a small video. It's the pull to refresh, so the refresh view container that's available from WinUI that we ported over, and it's something that you can use on your phones, Android, iOS, macOS, and others. On the other targets, I'm not too sure we'd have to have touch, but it's supported as well. So if you have touch on a Raspberry Pi, for instance, that would work as well. Jose saying, after Uno check mobile development with .NET is not installed on Windows 11 ARM. Yeah, that's the same thing. We're not testing on Windows 11 ARM, so it's definitely something that we're not doing here and validating. So probably we'll be having to do that kind of validations ahead of time. So you're going to be finding all sorts of dragons when doing this. We made also updates on the Linux frame buffer for DPI and scaling, DPI awareness and scaling, as well as 16-bit mode support. So that one was actually quite interesting, the 16-bit mode support. It's something that on some devices like the Raspberry Pi 3, the frame buffer does not support 32 bits mode for some reason. So if you try to set it into that mode, it just will fall back to 16 bits mode. And we're using the 565 mode. So it's 5 for red, 6 for green, and 5 for blue. And it will give you something that looks nice. And we got Morten Nielsen from Esri has been looking at this, and he got the Linux frame buffer support running on a rounded square from a Raspberry Pi 0, if I remember correctly, or a very small device. And some of those devices are using scaling of 2, if I remember correctly, so 200%. So we had that support. So in some cases, the devices actually provide the actual dimensions of the screen, so the physical dimensions of the screens, and we're able to detect the scaling based on that. But in some other cases, it's not possible. So you're going to be able to find all those details about how to change select the frame buffer, override the scaling if there's any, let's say the screen is not reporting its size properly, you can change the scaling that way. So that's one of the other cool things. And we made other changes with regards to being able to exit an application that is using frame buffer, because when you run an application with the frame buffer, you're basically taking over the whole screen. So there's no shell, there's no window manager of any kind. So you have to have a support for keystrokes there. So keyboard support was already there, but there was no way to actually exit the application. So now it's possible to exit the application. So you can map the key wherever you want. I think we do have some documentation here. There you go. And here, exiting the application with F12 and calling application current exit, and we'll just close the application. So this method will exit. So there is that. And then we made all sorts of nice improvements for Uno Toolkit. So Toolkit, we added the safe area control. This is an evolution of the visible bounce padding behavior that we had embedded into Uno, but this version of safe area is actually more interesting. And it actually supports the soft input, which was not possible before. So when you open the soft input of for a keyboard, something like that at the bottom, or wherever that can be on your screen, the safe area control will automatically change the available layout for a specific control, or when it is attached or being a control. So that's something that is quite interesting. So take a look at this. I think we have some documentation available in here. So if you go to extensions and learn, reference, it's not extension at all, it's toolkit. And you get controls, we have safe area, and then we have a lot of documentation to explain what does what, and if it's an inset, if it's using padding, inset padding or margins, if it's using the control mode, or if it's using the attached property mode. So you get to 2 modes for that. So that's one of the cool things for safe area. So let us know, take a look at that control. It's particularly important if you're making an application for iOS, and particularly if you're using, I don't know if you're developing for the iOS for iOS 16 and the new iPhone 14, which has the dynamic island stuff at the top. That may be something of interest for you. We added a status bar attached property that allows to set the style for that particular control. So when you're navigating to a specific page which has a specific layout, you may be able to change the visual colors of this. Change a few things with input extensions also. So when you're inside of a text box, you can say which element is the next one when you press enter. And what else? So we made also many changes with regards to authentication. So if you're using MSAL, OIDC, or any kind of authentication mechanism in your application, and you're using Uno extensions, that's something that you can use to do authentication. And if I remember correctly, we did refresh token as well, or maybe it's coming in a future version. We also made a lot of changes to Uno extensions with list feeds, and being able to have the immutable pattern and reactive programming, all the while having performance data virtualization for list feeds and doing comparisons and all those sorts of performance optimizations that we have with regards to all of this. We have an update for Figma, performance-wise and feature-wise, but there's going to be a blog post that's going to come up very soon with additional performance improvements and features. So stay on the lookout for that one. We also made, we had a very nice contribution from Workgroup Engineering about render target bitmap. And that one is particularly important because inside of Uno UI, we're making a lot of screenshot comparison to make sure that, let's say, we change the visual of a specific area and making sure that we're actually not regressing when we're doing specific fixes and all this. And we were previously doing those kinds of performance those kinds of validation using Xamarin UI Test. And the problem with that is taking a screenshot using Xamarin UI Test is about 1 second. So if you're making thousands of tests, the test can do, the overall runtime of the run length of the tests can be very long. So doing random target bitmap, it takes a few milliseconds to take a screenshot of the screen wherever supported, and it makes the testing a lot faster. We're still not there yet for WebAssembly, but we're going to get there very soon. We have a few ideas to get to the point where we actually can make screenshot of an app that runs WebAssembly. Not something that you would be able to use in a normal app because it's not something that is possible as part of what browsers allow to do, unfortunately. But that would be something that we're looking at. We also have the WebAssembly preloading and lazy font loading that we added. That one is actually pretty nice. It allows for loading any kind of fonts inside of an application. It's something that we needed a lot because fonts take a bit of time to load, even though you're explicitly specifying the fonts inside of a CSS file, for instance. And there's a let me post you the links of all this. That's the links. So there's build calc that says thank you for the fonts improvement, of course, and you're gonna like the things that we're gonna publish in Uno 4.6. We're gonna be working on something that allows to have fonts or fonts and assets, not just fonts and assets being part of NuGet packages. So if you're making a library that has any kind of assets, that's going to be supported, and it's something that WinUI supports by default. You can have, let's say, content files that are specified as part of your project, and those end up being inside of the NuGet package. It's not something that we are supporting as part of Uno yet, and it's something that the WebAssembly font loading was a prerequisite for getting there. So MS Apex is something that's particularly important. So you put an MS Apex file inside of your WebAssembly project, and will automatically be available as part of your application without doing anything. And I was going to that. So when you have a font that needs to be loaded as part of a WebAssembly app, even if you're specifying it as part of a CSS file, the font is always going to take a bit of time to load, particularly if the application is taking a bit of time to initialize. And what we did is detect that those fonts get loaded later on, and we refresh the UI. So you may see some glitches visually. So the font's getting adjusted if you don't do anything. So that's the font being loaded by the browser, and then we're adjusting to this. So there's a way to avoid that thing of the relayout, and there's a way to wait for specific fonts to be loaded. Let's say you can just disable the splash screen after those fonts have been loaded. So that's the kind of things that we can do. So there's also iOS 16 fixes. So those ones are now that iOS 16 is out. I think I talked about it on the last stream. It's basically update to the latest Uno, and you're not going to have any issues. But if you did, let's say you have let's say text box that's running in your app, and let's say Uno 4 point something that's not been patched, then the application would crash as soon as a user would tap on a text box that had content. And that's been fixed. So just so you know. And we've made a bunch of additional XAML IntelliSense and Android performance updates. Those ones are particularly interesting with regards to shape and reducing locations, and another one that's related to how we're doing Android resource lookups there. So we're generating resource lookups, and that improves the performance there. So that's pretty nice. So, well, you're welcome, BuildCat, for the so don't thank us yet. It's not out yet, but we're going to be definitely working on it, because it's something that people have been asking for a while, and it needed a few prerequisites to get there, and the fonts loading stuff was one of the things that we're missing. So we're getting there. Jose is asking, which installer solution does Uno use for each platform? Does Uno use MSIX for Windows? So Uno doesn't do anything with regards to installers. If you want to install, it's up to you to do installation. So you would install, let's say on Windows, if you're making a WPF application or a GTK application, you can publish your app wherever you want. Could be a click once app, could be an MSIX, could be a Wix installer if you want. Any kind of installation that you want. So the only thing is that if you're using a Windows app, so the Windows head that's inside of the Uno template, this is using MSIX because it's Microsoft that's providing that. But Uno for the other targets, so GTK, WPF, iOS, Android, and the others, this is publishing that's specific to those. For WebAssembly, it's publishable as it's a website, so you're basically publishing it as you would. As for the others, it's platform dependent. So use whatever is available already as part of the standard deployment techniques for all of that. So there you go. And of course, many community updates. Thank you everyone for getting there and helping us make the platform greater. So that's it. So now we're going to take a look at one specific issue that was raised by a few of our customers, where in some cases, having an application has, let's say, something in a path, let's say, for instance, ENPL or anything like that, way up in the path could cause the resource parser to just do weird things. So what we're going to do is going to take a look at what happens and if we can fix something about it. So to test this, we're going to go into Uno, and we're going to be using the net standard. We're going to be using the net standard test framework. And also, as I was saying, about during the last stream, I was mentioning that we made a lot of changes inside the source generation features, and we've now enabled the embedded Roslyn generation for all targets inside of Uno, and that makes for a way faster compilation. So that's pretty interesting. We're still working on making the compilation loop faster, particularly with regards to memory consumption. So that's impacting Uno itself, but it's also impacting, of course, the applications that are using source generation. So stay on the lookout for those. We have Yusuf that's working on those features, and it's amazing. So let's go to this. So I have the Uno target framework override that's in .NET 4.6, and I think we made the change. So yeah, what we did here is we changed the override file so that it makes it easier to say which target framework override should you use for which platform and which solution file filter you should be using. The format before was a bit a bit less, more interesting, a little bit less interesting. So let me actually change that so it gets easier next time someone looks at the stream. So the one that we're looking at here is we're going to be doing some some unit testing. And so what we're going to do is take that one, so it's already there, and we're going to be opening the Uno UI unit tests only solution filter. So let's go for this one. Solution filter, there it is. So what we're going to try is to have localization work or fail for that matter, depending on the platform that we're using. And actually, I think we do have unit tests specifically for that. So the location where we're doing that parsing is in the Uno UI tasks, and we have something that is called the Resources Generator, and we have an Uno Pri Resource Generator. So it basically takes the ResW files, and it generates files that are PRI files that are embedded into the Uno project. And what we're doing is basically parsing those files, the ResW files, and then embedding those files as embedded files into your library. And in there, we're doing a few things like parsing the resource. For instance, you can see here we have a get resources for items. So for each individual ResW file, we're trying to determine what is the language found for that specific entry. And the problem would be that, and if I take a look again at that specific issue, it says localized resources is not available if the project is created with a folder that contains a culture code name. And the problem is that it could be anywhere in the path. So it's probably that we're trying to guess the language name too far in the path, and yeah, that's what we're trying to do, and we're getting most of them probably too far up the chain. So let's see what we could do. We could probably do this inside of a sample application. So let's create a sample application on the side that will do. We'll try to replicate this. So I would say that I have to make an Uno platform app that is inside a folder. Let's call it localization FR. And then I'm going to call it this localization. So I'm going to be removing most of those because they're not useful. I'm just going to keep the GTK version for now. Can remove the macOS one as well. It's going to make for a smaller project. And we're going to try to figure out where we need to split the path. And probably we're being too eager into how we're building all of those assets. So if I take a look at the app itself, we can see in the strings that we have an EN folder here. And we're going to try to build the application and see what happens currently. So we have an English default set of resources. And I would assume that when we'll be opening the DLL that's for the project, we're going to be finding only English resources. And if the issue is there, we're going to be finding that it's actually not the case. So let's open this with ILSpy. And let's go take a look at the resources here. Okay, so we have strings en that works properly. So maybe it's something else. Maybe it's because it's not the right folder. Maybe it's it should be having something else. So if we take a look at the way parsing is done, we have the directory separator character. We're trying to parse resource qualifier. And if it contains a language tag, trying to parse it. So maybe we could do something like maybe having a complete name or something. I don't know if there was maybe there was a sample app that was there before. No, there's no repro. So we could probably, I think there's another one that has a repro. Yeah, there's that one that has a repro. So maybe we can get to the repro of this one. Okay, so we have DA here. Okay, so the application is in a folder that's called DA. So let's do it that way as well. Or let's go we're going to take the app that actually is a repro so we can see if it actually does the same thing. So let's extract it here. So we say it's let's see if we can repro that specific issue. So we're going to close that version, and let's nope. Okay, so we have let's go for the GTK one and see what we get. So let's see in the shared project. There's nothing in the shared project, interestingly. So the shared project is empty, but looks like it was manipulated in some capacity. And then if we go to the GTK project and we take a look at the GTK DLL, we have resources here, but the resources are the right ones. Okay, so we probably have another problem there. Ah, no, the name is the right one, but the resources inside are not the right ones. Okay, so that's what it is. Okay, so you can see here that the resources, you can see that in the format, and that's something that it needs to probably be changed. So this is the actual path of the resource, but this is the path. This is the actual resource culture name that was used for that specific file. So we can see here that's not the right one. It says DA, but it's not appropriate. So let's go see if we can debug. So we made a few changes recently to be able to debug some of the tasks that are created as part of Uno. Actually, let's upgrade the whole solution. It's going to be easier. We're going to be upgrading to the latest pre-release. If it wants to get there. Okay, so let's go for all the Uno stuff. And actually, I don't think I'm going to be able to replicate that as well. So it's something that we're going to have to change. So this is an Uno WinUI application, and the reason it will be troubles is that the Uno solution is not in Uno WinUI, it's Uno UI. So I'm going to have to replicate that specific solution using Uno UI for now. And it's something that we have been having issues with a few of the changes recently, and we are still finding something to get contribution easier in that sense. The idea is that because Uno is the source control for Uno is using the UWP API set, but most of the new templates are using WinUI. That means that when we want to move from one to the other, we have to convert the source tree to be WinUI compatible, and that can be there's a few things that we need to adjust to get there, and we're not there yet. So there's a branch that is supposed to be having the latest master as WinUI compatible, but it's not updated properly. So that's one of the things that we need to change. So to fix this, we're going to make the same issue that we had before, but this time using a UWP project. I'm going to be using the UWP project to fix this. So let's call it 02. And we're going to try to override the task that generates the resources for that specific project. So this project is a bit bigger. We're going to be removing most of the targets because they're not useful for what we're trying to do. There we go. And then let's try again to see if we're reproducing the issue with that specific target only. Should be the case. So we have the bin net5, which is not a problem. It built properly. Let's take a look at that file. And if in the resources, we should be having FR. There we go. So, okay. So the resource file that's embedded doesn't have the right culture code. So we're going to change this. So let's update to the latest Uno this time. So it's not Uno WinUI, it's just Uno UI, not WinUI. So let's update to those versions. So the reason we're getting to that version is that we made changes in the way MS-Build tasks are loaded, and it may be a bit easier to work with. So let's figure if it will help. So if I go back to Uno and I change the cross-targeting props file to use the 4.6334, which is the version that I'm using in my localization sample. And let's go and put a breakpoint. I'm going to do debugger.launch. And we rebuild this. We're going to see that the output folder for this particular binary, so uno.ui tasks, is going to be in the 460.334 folder, so that when we build again, we're going to get to the newer builds, for the newer sources for this particular build here. So let's see, do we get a breakpoint? No, we don't. Okay, so maybe this got loaded in some way, or maybe it's not loading the right. Oh, yes, I know. Okay, so that's something that's interesting. So when we are getting to Uno, in that case, the file that we're getting for this path is not using the right versioning. So you can see here that the file that comes from the NuGet package is versioned with this 6.7. It's the Git commit ID. So we're going to change the targets file so that it targets the v0 binary here. And to get to that, we're building for GTK. So this is going to be the net standard 2 target. And we have the Uno UI task for target file. And we're going to change that file so that the v something becomes v0. We're going to save. So we changed the cached version in the global system cache. Now when we rebuild, we should be getting to the version that we have. Okay, so now we're going to be opening inside of the other Visual Studio, and then we're going to go to the parsing of the resource candidates. There we go. So the path that I'm getting is localization FR, localization issue, blah, 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 and then strings en resource.resw. So the problem here is that we're getting to a path where we're we're parsing every individual part of the path using a lower to higher, or from the first to last of the path, parts of the path, and that's not the right one. Probably should be first the other way around to determine what is the resource location for this. The thing is that we probably should not be parsing the whole path, because there's no point in saying, let's say the project is, let's say, starting from here. What's the point of trying to figure out what's the path, or trying to figure out if this is a valid culture because it's part of the path somewhere up. So one of the things that we could do is just part the other way around. So start from the last item and just go up and try to find something there. But it may not be just enough, because if we're having a string that's not in the right folder, maybe it's going to be a neutral culture or something like that, and will not work properly. So let's try first and see if we have the right thing. So let's do a reverse. Let's do a reverse here, and we're going to take the first part of the path that is not null, that matches a valid resource qualifier. So let's rebuild and see if our changes actually worked previously. So we made some changes to avoid the DLLs to be locked, but maybe it will still be locked. So we'll see. That's the surprise. Yeah, there it is. So it's locked. Okay. So there's one thing that we can do is kill MS build. So let's see if that helps. Pascal. And let's do that for now. Let's see if it helps. Sometimes Visual Studio is locking the task, so it doesn't work. This time it worked. Okay, so we're good for that one. Visual Studio did not lock the assembly. So let's rebuild and see if we're getting the proper resources this time. So let's refresh when the build is done. Okay, so if we go again into the resources file, do we have English? Okay, we have English this time. So now we're parsing the path from the last item to the first item, and we're getting to the proper culture. So it kind of fixes the issue, but it may not be just enough. What we're going to see is if the path is actually longer. So one thing that we have to do when we're fixing is to do some unit testing. So we can see that the unit tests that we have here are not really testing everything. They're testing for from a specific path, but not with a longer path. So we can see that we have the logical path and the relative path, which in many cases is actually the full path, which is a problem. So we probably should be having something that makes more sense with regards to the path parsing. But let's add a new row. So we're going to be reverting the change that we made here. So we remove the reverse. And we're going to add another change that says the folder is called FR, and then its assets as logo, and it should be this culture, but maybe with the repro case, we're not going to get to something that let's see if we can actually get the unit tests to repro our issue. So what we could see is that when running the actual build process, is that the path here was marked as being relative, but when executing it actually is not relative. So that means that somewhere we should be having we should be removing the absolute part of the path to get it to be a relative one. And most of the time, what we should be doing is having use make relative. So there's a path that make relative that actually creates a relative path, and we should be having that properly. So why did we have unable to copy? Oh yes, so we're having the same issue with the taskil. I'm just going to be removing the breakpoint that I added. It's probably a bit too heavy. I think it was there at the top. Okay, so let's restart our test and see if it actually fails. It should be. So the build's actually a bit faster now because of all the changes that we made to the source generators. You can see that Uno UI, even though it's a very big project with lots of sources and XAML files, it actually builds a lot faster, and it fails, so that's good. So let's see what we do have here. It says that it should have been SRCYRL, and it's actually French. So now if we revert our test and we try again. Come on, Visual Studio. So I had a power outage just before the stream. That's why it started 20 minutes late. And for some reason, my Windows just, the machine I'm connecting to for the stream was not cooperating that much. And I thought it was caused by this, but it's not. So it's working better now. Power outages during streams. Oh, it's not going to happen. I have a UPS, but it's not supposed to be holding for an hour or so. So okay, so we're green. So that's the fix. Having the part of the path that contains all of this. The thing is that we may be able to have a folder that contains something like FR or something. So I don't think we should be fixing the issue in that sense, because it's always going to be the first part of the path that makes sense to be fixed there. And even if you're making something, so let's say we were determining that when you're building your application, actually something that we probably should be testing with WinUI to determine what the language is when it gets out of this. But let's say if you're in strings and then you add just a ResW file at the top like this. If you do this, it's supposed to be invariant if I remember correctly, but I'm not too sure. So in that case, if you're making a file that looks like this, what's the culture? Then we're gonna try it out. Because I don't really know what it's supposed to be doing in that case. So let's create. We could probably use the other project that we created before. Let's stay with localization one. I think I didn't remove everything. Yeah, we have the Windows one. Okay, so let's go to this one, and we're going to take the file at the top and put it here and see what Windows does. And inside we're going to say, we're going to call it neutral because I'm not too sure if it's supposed to be that way. And then we're going to build the Windows app and see what's inside. So let's see what's inside WinUI. So we have publish runtime. There should be a PRI file. There it is. So we have the resources PRI file. And what is inside? Let's open it with, let's go bloat notepad. Let's see what it does with it. Okay, so in Notepad, what do we have? We have lots of things. So MRM, if I remember correctly, I think it's Modern Resource Manager. So it's PRI2, data item. So we have MS Apex for something. We have XBF files. We have the assets. We have the resources here. And then later on, we have Hello World here, which is the content of, let me check. I don't even know what that is. The Hello World that we can see here. So it would be the content of the text block, I would guess. Yeah, that's the, okay, so that's the XAML file. That's inside a PRI file. And then should be finding neutral somewhere. We have neutral. Okay, so we have neutral test localization 1, that's here. And we have test localization here. Now, what I don't know is which local is which using. It doesn't say which is which. Okay, so we're going to try it out. We're going to see at runtime what that does. So let's say we say application name 2, and we're going to be in the main page. And we're going to try to get the resource loader. So we got both, and we're going to go for the WinUI 1. What does it say? Okay, so we're in Uno, and that one is supposed to be implemented, but for some, I'll say it's the it's just the constructor that says that it's not implemented, but that's not a big deal. Okay, so get the loader, and if we do get string, if I do a get string for application name 2, what do I get? Okay, so the build is failing because application model does not exist in Microsoft. Okay. Interesting. Maybe I'm missing something there. Okay, so let's go for resource loader get for independent use. I think that one is supposed to be working. Let's see. Otherwise, it may be that we're missing the dependency in Uno, or in the Uno template, not necessarily in WinUI itself, but we'll see. Okay, so we got the loader, and the string is neutral localization. Okay, so the file at the top is actually loaded as a neutral, the neutral language. That's pretty interesting because I don't think it's something that we do support as part of Uno. And if I do, okay, so if I add an application localization here, so let's say I duplicate the string here, I say it's neutral application name, and I start it again. I start it again, and in here I do second lookup for application name. What will I get? So S is still the same thing for localization, and second one is taste localization. Okay, so that means that the file that was placed at the root is really a neutral culture version of the resources, and that one is specific for English. That's not something that we support in Uno at this point, and that would probably be a problem because if we place a file at the top like this, that file would probably pick up the language from the folder that's above. So in that case, we see that actually that would be something interesting, because if I say so, we have the localized version of that file. If I do English. And then my application is supposed to be running in French. Let's see what that does, because I'm not too sure, to be honest. So I think it's not globalization extension, is it's a culture override, but I never remember the full name of this. No, it's language override. Language override. Application languages, primary languages override. Okay, so we're going to be using this one to see if we can change that to French and get to something different. Okay, so this is taking a string. Let's go for FRCA to be local. Okay. So if I start the application again, well, I did not put the breakpoint, so it's not particularly useful. So I get English here and English there. So that means that the neutral culture file was not used, even though it was at the root. Okay, so it's probably something that should be taken a look at. Because if we're doing this inside of an Uno app, I don't even know what that's going to do. Well, actually, let's run the application and see what happens, because probably will do some interesting things. Okay, so we have neutral here and neutral here. Okay, so it does the neutral for both. Interestingly, oh, so okay, so the reason for this is that it's because we changed the language, it actually works. So what I don't know is that it should have taken the independent use. So maybe it's because it's independent use. Maybe we should be having the one for a specific culture, but maybe that's the part out that's where it breaks. So Uno is actually taking that version, but if we go back in there, let's say we remove the FRCA, what do we get? Okay, so we get nothing and nothing. We get nothing for both. So that's interesting. So that's a completely different behavior. It looks like we're not even getting the both of those, even though we're in English. So there's definitely another problem here. Let's see if we remove this. And it could be related to the fact that the path has a, yeah, the path has a the path has the French included in there. Let's see if we take a look at the localization files. So if we open the resources here, what do we get? So we get the default in French, which is not right. And the second one is in French as well. So it's not good as well. And one of the reasons it may have failed is because the file that's loaded up is probably not the right one. Probably because we didn't override we changed a few things here, so it did not get updated properly. So let's go. Oh, that's correct. So the reason it fails in that context is because we rolled back to another app which doesn't have the changes that we made. So it makes sense that the app is behaving the way it behaves, because everything is French as a result, because the part of the path is in French at the beginning. So that explains the whole thing. So the fix is what it is. We're probably going to be opening an issue with regards to the default culture, or the neutral culture file that's supposed to be located at the top. And the neutral one is supposed to be having something different, a fallback value. And in that case, if we're not specifying anything, it's supposed to be using something different, and probably it's supposed to be behaving differently. So we're going to have to figure that one out. But anyway, so that means that the fix that we have for the resource candidate here with a reversal of the lookup for the path is good enough. We still found out that we have a problem with the neutral culture when the file is placed at the top. So there you go. We have done the loop. So we have the unit tests that do go and validate that the resource candidate that is the right one. So we have validated that at the top. So we're actually parsing only the first one, starting from the end, and we have validated it actually works inside of an app, and we should be good to go. So that will be a new PR that goes into Uno. It'll fix a happy customer of ours that was having an issue with folders that were having just 2 letters that were matching globalized culture name. So there you go. I hope you learned a bunch. I'm glad I found another issue with the neutral culture. But until then, have fun with Uno and happy coding. See you next week. Bye for now.